Please be seated. Mr. Firehound, whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Deputy, during your direct testimony, you indicated a couple different times, I think, that you said where the body was. This is where you were told the body was, right?
Yes.
And that was provided ultimately, or the source of that information would have come from probably Tristan, right?
Yes, Tristan told Deputy Luke Thompson, and then Deputy Luke Thompson told me.
All right. And your examination of the shed, we'll keep calling it that, consisted of a walk around, and then you went through and looked for places where someone might have fell and struck their head or left some blood or something like that. Is that how I understood you to say?
Yes.
And you didn't find anything like that?
I just found 2 drops of blood, and that was in the placement where Amy was said to be located.
If I could ask the state to please pull up Exhibit 111, the aerial. Can I go up there, Your Honor?
Yes, go right ahead.
I want to ask you about those cameras. There was a camera on this barn.
No.
Which one?
South barn,
This one?
just to north of the loading chute.
In this area?
Yes.
And where was the other camera?
They were both on where your finger was.
Here?
Yep.
Just angled at different angles?
Yes.
And the recording equipment was over either in this area or in the main shop?
Yes.
Okay. And only one of the, well, let me check my notes. You said one of the cameras was pointed in the direction of the shed.
Yes. One of the cameras was pointed right at the red shed where Amy was found, the shed with a 1 on it.
Okay. And the other one was pointed where?
The other one was pointed, there's a semi in the yard, you can see that right there. The coverage, the video covered those 3 grain bins right in between where number 12 is on the picture, and it covered a view of the yard. You could see the shop. I actually viewed a feed truck filling them grain bins. So those grain bins are actually to the south of where that office is in the North Hog building. So if anybody, anybody that would come out.
And the camera that would show towards the shed, there was nothing on there.
No, we weren't able to obtain any video from that camera.
And the other direction, September 11th through October 29.
Yes.
And then there was some after November 10th.
The video, resumed recording on November 11th, the day after the homicide, to November 15th. And then we seized the unit on the 16th.
But that's the one that wouldn't show the shed.
It would show the travel path to and from the red shed.
Okay. Sir, I'm going to apologize in advance if I butcher some of these terms, because I'm not so educated about all this technology. The Exhibit 105, that was the long list of searches and visits that you just got done testifying about. Where did those searches, what device did those searches come from?
iPad,
All of them.
all of them, yes.
How do you know that?
Because I sent a search warrant to Google, and the indicator on that search warrant was his Todd Mullis 76 at gmail.com. That is the indicator for that device, the account on that device. So when you receive the results back, you can see in the list of searches, that's consistent with the search history because the device physically had organs of the body on it. The records that I received, organs of the body, is in the material. That's the only email account associated with that iPad. That's how I know that those searches are from that iPad. Because you have to enter an indicator, if you would say that, of that Google account. That makes sense.
Did you also conduct what's known as a Celebrite exam of the iPad?
Yes.
And tell the jury, please, what a Celebrite exam is.
So a Celebrite exam is I take the physical unit and I hook it to a machine, and it extracts all of the physical data that's on the machine to like an external device so I can view it. And it doesn't disrupt any of the stuff that is still stored on the machine, like contacts, phone calls, text messages, things of that nature.
Even deleted material?
Not always.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Have you made a comparison between the Celebrite, and I think the term that a lot of people use is a Celebrite dump, where it sucks all that information out of a device? Have you made a comparison between the Celebrite dump on Todd's iPad and 105 to see if they're the same?
I don't know if I physically did that or not.
And if there's all these searches are not on that Celebrite dump, what would that tell us?
These are the Google searches from the iPad. The ones I obtained from Google with the authentication letter, these are the searches from the iPad.
Isn't it possible for someone to log in to someone's Todd Mullis 76 at gmail.com from another device?
Yes, you can log into an email any device. Sure, yes.
For instance, if my assistant down here, we each have a laptop in our office, and she came in and logged in, it would look like I was making a search, right?
I don't know if that would track your Google history. I think your Google history is machine specific.
But if you log in to...
You can log into your email on any device.
Right.
That's just your email. That Google offers a service, which is email. You can have email, but as far as logging into somebody else's device and then showing that search history on that device, I don't believe that's possible.
Well, if I understand your testimony or what you're telling the jury here today is that all these searches were made by Todd Mullis off that iPad.
Yes.
And all of these you believe either relate to combines and farming or to these suspicious searches about ancient history of cheating people and stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay. A moment, Your Honor. I'm going to go through 105 and pick out a few searches or visits, and I would ask the state to please pull up. I'm looking at July 19th, 2018, and the time shown is 2:49 and 18. Your Honor, may I approach while they're looking for that?
Yes, go ahead.
You have your list there, Deputy?
Yes.
On the page at the bottom, July 18th at 2:07. You see that one?
Yes.
Okay, go up from there about 11 lines. What's that search?
Is this July 19th, 2018 at 2:46 a.m.?
Yes.
Search for wedding rings for women.
What's the next one on?
www.rothjewelers.com.
Next one up.
Search for design a wedding ring.
At 2:51:34. Couple more up.
Search for design a wedding ring.
The next four on the above that.
Design.kdiamonds.com.
And there's other jewelry ones in between.
Yes.
If you go up to the top four, just tell us what those four are on that page.
They look like bridal searches. www.chicboutiqueny.com.
So, if I understand you correctly, all these searches are being done from Todd Mullis's iPad,
Yes.
and he's searching for wedding dresses and wedding rings.
There are searches that are in relation to his employment, to his hobbies, to his interests, and to items that he physically owns. Yes.
I didn't ask you that. You're telling the jury that Mr. Mullis is looking for wedding rings and designing diamonds and going to wedding boutiques.
We could be shopping for something of that such.
Or somebody else could be doing these searches, right?
It's possible, but not probable.
Off a different device. Amy Mullis.
Off of a different device? No. These searches are from the iPad.
So if we take a time out here and have you compare the Celebrite dump, we're going to find every one of these searches on that Celebrite dump.
As I explained before in my testimony, when you click on the Google browser, it's going to give you a short list of search items. So 10, 12, 15. And they drop off after a while because the system does not store all those. I performed a search warrant through Google associated with Todd Mullis's email. I got a return back for all the Google searches that were performed on that machine. Now on that iPad, when you get into the Google search bar and you click on it, and you can see your last 10 to 15 Google searches. I seen organs of the body. When I received my warrant back from Google, you can see on the 700 pages that I received back, organs of the body is in my list in my packet I received from Google. I also received a letter of authentication from Google with them records to indicate those are the searches from the iPad.
How many pages was the Celebrite dump?
That went on a flash drive, so I didn't print that out, but it's on an external storage device.
But I don't think you answered my question. If we compare the Celebrite dump, which we have right here, with Exhibit 105, they should be the same.
It depends on if the Cellbrite dump, you would say, pulled the internet history. Sometimes Cellbrite dumps don't pull internet history. Like I had stated before, when you manually download a phone or a device using Cellbrite,
Sir,
it pulls contacts, text messages, phone calls.
Excuse me.
Objection, Judge. He needs to allow him to finish the answer.
Well, he didn't exactly answer it. I'm going to let counsel ask another question. You'll get a chance to redirect. Go ahead.
Let me check for a few more here, just a second. On July 15th, 2018, this would be at the very top of the, well, not, it's one line down from the top of the page. You find that?
Yes.
What's that a search for?
Search for Zales.com.
Zales is a diamond place, isn't it?
Yes.
Next one down.
That was a search for www.pinterest.com.
What's Pinterest?
I'd have to ask my wife. I don't use Pinterest, I guess.
Okay. But you're saying Mr. Mullis did off his iPad?
The records show that the iPad searched that.
Okay.
Yes.
Then you talked about some there, below there, about swimming and floating and so forth. Below that, July 9th, 1750-54. What's that one?
This was a search for Lady Antebellum. We owned the night.
Singing group, right?
Country, yes.
Okay. Further down, there's Carrie Underwood.
Yes. Also a country artist.
Do you see any in here for the American Inn in Newton, Iowa? Did you ever see-
Yes.
Did you coincide that with any of the investigation as to Amy Mullis's travels during the summer of 2018?
I'd have to look back to compare dates.
Do you know if Mr. Mullis ever went to the American Inn in Newton, Iowa?
I do not know that.
And we can, well, one of these that you testified about going back to January 21st of 18 at 3:35.
What was the date again?
January 21 at 3:35:24. What's that one?
This is a search for how to do a DNA test without the father knowing.
Dangerous question, I suppose. But why would Todd Mullis do a search like that
I don't know.
unless someone else did?
Objection. Is that a question?
Is it possible someone else did?
It's possible, but it's not probable.
I want to talk to you about some of the times that you've given. What's UTC mean on this printout?
Central Standard Time.
If the internet tells you you're wrong, would you disagree?
Can you ask that again? I guess I've never had the internet tell me I'm wrong.
Have you ever researched that UTC is the successor to Greenwich Meridian Time, GMT?
Okay. I've never searched that, no.
And that to obtain the time in the different time zones that in the central United States, during daylight savings time, you would subtract 5 hours to get the correct time.
Okay.
So these times you're saying 2:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. If you subtract 5 hours, it's being done in the evening.
Objection, is there a question pending, Judge?
Mr. Firehelm, go ahead, ask a question.
Do you understand this UTC concept?
No.
So if you don't understand it, then could your times be off?
I went by the times on displayed on the search history.
The UTC time, as it's shown on there?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you, you went through and talked about searches or visits that seem to talk about cheating and infidelity and ancient history dealing with issues like that and so forth. And I think you worked up, and then it switched off to some searches about Jerry Frazier. Does that kind of track with the flow of your questions and answers?
Yes.
And that Frazier searches, I believe, were happening in mid to late July.
I'd have to check the date, but yes, the searches were completed.
Okay. In your review of 105 and the whole body of searches, were there similar types of searches about infidelity and cheating and so forth that were occurring, let's say, after the end of July?
I believe there's some in August. I'd have to read through all these again, but I know within what we have, there are searches related to that.
And then the one you found particularly interesting was on November 6th, I think, the one about body organs.
Yes.
And was there anything unique about that day as it relates to this case in terms of Amy Mullis, Todd Mullis, and
It's 4 days before the homicide.
did you also learn it was also a day that she had a medical procedure done?
It could have been.
Okay. So if someone's going to have a medical procedure done, they might search a medical website or whatever you want to call it. Possible?
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
Okay. You went through a grouping that seemed to deal with hunter safety. Remember that?
Yes.
I guess, do you believe that for Todd Mullis being what appears to be a very active hunter, fisherman, that kind of thing, would those be unusual?
As it relates to being a hunter,
Right.
I just know there's searches of hunter education within his searches. I mean, that's not unusual for a hunter, I guess.
I'm just asking, the ones that you talked about, whether or not those were suspicious searches or why they're being emphasized.
We just created a cluster of the searches that we felt should be displayed that are relevant and with the whole picture of things.
Do you know if any of the Mullis children were involved in any hunter safety courses or anything like that?
I don't.
All right, I think that's all I have for now, sir. Thanks.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Deputy, just so that we're clear for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you physically looked at this iPad, correct?
Yes.
And based on your understanding of what Cellbrite is or what you indicated, it is whatever is on the device at that time.
Yes, basically what you're doing is your cell phone or your iPad, you're transferring whatever is on that machine physically onto an external device so you can view it.
Is that sometimes commonly known as a dump, a cell phone or iPad
Yes.
dump?
Yes.
And as the defense attorney asked you, sometimes deleted material is on there,
Sometimes there is,
and sometimes there isn't.
and sometimes there isn't.
And
And sometimes you have internet history transfer over, and sometimes you don't.
the internet history that you received connected to this Gmail account spanned approximately, was it almost 18 months or around that amount of time?
The results I got back from Google?
Yes.
Yes, from 2017 to the present.
And you
date.
actually executed a search warrant for the specific account of Todd Mullis 76@gmail.com.
Yes,
And for searches related to that Gmail account and that Google account also, correct?
yes,
And Todd Mullis has a flip phone, correct?
correct. And
And-
that does not have internet.
You learned that Amy Mullis had a phone
Yes,
and that she had a specific Gmail account.
she did, yes.
And that was mullisrn@gmail.com.
Yes,
And you also executed a search warrant for that Gmail account and those searches as well.
yes,
And you were able in your investigation, analyze the data that you received.
yes,
Now, counsel asked you a lot about searches about bridal, I think it was a bridal place, and wedding rings. You recall those?
yes,
And there are some searches on the records that you talked about that do have some of those things, correct?
yes,
None of those are directly before or directly after the cluster of searches that we highlighted to the jury.
no,
And he also asked you about UTC time, correct?
yes,
The thing that was most significant about the searches was the item searched, correct?
yeah, it's content,
And then also what was searched in succession.
yes. Before and after, yes,
Now, Amy Mullis, in your investigation, was an RN nurse, correct?
correct, yes,
And you learned that she had a simple procedure on November 6, 2018.
yes,
And that was nothing to do with her organs,
correct, yes.
nothing further.
Any recross?
If Amy had the password to the iPad, could she then go in and do searches on the Mullis account?
Yeah, if you have a password to an iPad, you can go in and do searches on the machine, sure.
And that would show up on 105 then?
Yeah, whatever searches are done on that machine, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
And did you determine whether or not Amy had that password to the iPad?
I don't know if she had it or not.
Okay. But what you just said, I think I understood you, is if she had it, she could get on the iPad and do searches.
Objection asked and answered.
I'll allow it, go ahead.
Yes, if you have a password to a device, yeah, you can get on it and do a search.
Kind of like my example of Christie getting on my laptop at work.
Objection, cumulative judge, and he's already answered the question.
I'm going to allow it, go ahead.
Please re-ask the question.
If Christie got on my laptop at the office, she could do searches and it would come up on my search history,
Yes, if she got on your laptop, she could search the internet on your laptop.
knowing my password to get in.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. You can step down. Another witness for the state?
Yes, Your Honor, Jon Turbett.
Right up this way, please. Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat. State your name and spell it, please.
Jon Turbett, that's Jon. Last name is Turbett, Turbett. B-E-T-T.
Go ahead, counsel.
Right. Sir, what area did you grow up in?
I actually was born and raised in Cedar Rapids, and I've lived in Dubuque for about the last 20 years.
Did you graduate from high school?
Yes, I did.
Where did you graduate from high school?
Kennedy High School.
Did you receive any additional schooling after that?
Yes, I have a 4-year degree, a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, and a law degree from the University of Iowa College of Law.
And what is your current occupation?
I've been employed by the Iowa Department of Public Safety for 19 years, specifically their Iowa's Division of Criminal Investigation, sometimes called the DCI.
Can you just explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the DCI is?
So I'm employed as a special agent, a certified police officer. Probably easier to explain that as a plainclothes police detective during my career. And I'm actually inside of the DCI assigned to a smaller unit that's referred to as the Major Crime Unit.
And you indicated that your title is special agent.
Yes.
And what kind of cases do you work on?
So as the title of our unit is the Major Case Unit, we really work any kind of state law violations, but a lot of those tend to be what would be deemed major cases. So a lot of those are felonies. We also are involved in most of the officer-involved shootings in the state of Iowa, as well as public corruption cases.
What are some of your duties being a special agent for the DCI?
So we're what's called a rural assistance agency, so we're basically on 24/7 call-out, and local police departments, sheriff's offices, other state agencies or federal agencies can call, and we would send our special agents to assist with criminal investigation in really all kinds of matters, but I work quite a bit of homicide, sex abuse, child abduction, those kinds of things.
Now, Agent, did you become involved in the murder investigation of Amy Mullis?
Yes, I did.
How did you become involved in that?
So I had some information, very little on the day of that, I believe. My immediate supervisor, special agent in charge, Mike Craffle with the DCI, had said that he'd had some conversation with the Delaware County Sheriff's Office about the death of Amy Mullis. At that time, my understanding was local law enforcement had said that it had been reported by the defendant as being a fall or an accidental death. My supervisor had talked to the Delaware County Sheriff's Office and consulted with them a little bit on what they should do that day, and then an autopsy was scheduled as is normal for that Monday, 2 days later.
What day did you become involved in this investigation?
I was called by Delaware County Sheriff's investigator Travis Hemesath right after the autopsy on that Monday, November 12th, 2018.
And you learned information based on the autopsy?
Yes.
What involvement did you have at that point?
So at that point, the Delaware County Sheriff's Office officially requested DCI assistance. I was assigned to be the primary point of contact for the DCI to work with local law enforcement and provide any investigative assistance that was needed.
And just briefly describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you're conducting an investigation such as this, what are some of the duties or jobs that you do in this type of investigation?
So we would work with our local partners and in law enforcement, and we would help them manage the case, identify what leads need to be followed. We would bring in whatever personnel was needed in addition to myself to help follow those leads, and that would involve things like processing the crime scene, and certainly one of the things we do a lot of is interviewing or interrogating.
Shortly after you were involved in this investigation, did you learn information that Amy Mullis was having an affair?
Yes.
And based on that information, what did you do?
So that was learned, I had heard that almost immediately, and so the day after I became involved and started to work with the Delaware County Sheriff's Office that Monday, Tuesday I actually went out and began to conduct interviews immediately. Some of those with friends, those closest to Amy, and then also the person that I was becoming aware she was in a current affair with.
And would that be Jerry Frazier?
Yes.
Did you actually have a conversation with Jerry Frazier?
Yes, on November 14th, so just 2 days after the autopsy, I actually located Jerry Frazier and interviewed him.
And approximately how long did that interview take place?
I believe that was about an hour and a half.
And what was the nature of your conversation with Jerry Frazier?
So I met Jerry. He sat in the next to me in my unmarked police vehicle, and we talked for an hour and a half. And he very quickly disclosed, he was forthcoming about the extent of his relationship with Amy, that he was involved in a romantic and sexual relationship with her since May of 2018, and in fact that they were still romantically and sexually involved up until the point of her murder.
And did Jerry give you any information or any additional information, I'll say?
So after we covered the background of his relationship with Amy and the details of that and how they communicated and some of those things, he provided me his cell phone number, his Gmail account, because he told me they had in fact communicated by way of Gmail as opposed to text messaging at some point in their relationship. And then I asked him to provide an account for his whereabouts on Saturday, November 10th, the day of Amy's murder, and also who else would be able to corroborate or validate his whereabouts on Saturday.
And did you then speak with additional people after talking with Jerry?
Yes, I took those names and followed up and spoke to those individuals as well.
And who were those individuals?
His college-age son and his wife.
And what were you able to confirm on that from that date, from the date of, November 10th, 2018?
So both individuals corroborated exactly what Jerry had told me about his whereabouts on Saturday. In fact, his college-age son had excellent recall. He didn't normally come home on weekends. His dad had asked him back to complete a specific project that Saturday morning. And so they had gotten up and spent all Saturday morning doing work, and then they watched college football. And he actually had really good recall about all the games. And so he went through that day that he spent with his dad, as well as the fact that the mother, Jerry's wife, Christy, had actually called. She was running, helping on a volunteer team all day with a volunteer benefit event for someone in their community. A young man had passed, and Christy had been spending all day at the community center. She actually had called Jerry and their college-age son and asked them to pick a few items up and bring them over to her in the afternoon. And so she and the son both confirmed Jerry's whereabouts and that he was with the son all day.
And at that point, was Jerry Frazier a person of interest?
He was.
He was initially, correct?
Initially. And then after those interviews, and then from my conversations with him and the others, we sought a search warrant. A judge authorized search warrants both for his cell phone records, his cell phone activity, as well as his Gmail records, because we knew that was a primary means for him to communicate with Amy. So we gathered all of that data. That took some time and looked at that, and then he no longer was a person of interest after all of this investigative effort.
And were you able to confirm that Jerry was in the Hemesath area from 10:40 till that afternoon?
Yes, part of the analysis of those cell phone records allows us to see which cell phone towers, just like your cell phone or mine, where his call activity was at on Saturday. And we could see that Jerry Frazier's cell phone had cell phone activity around 10:45, 11:45, 12:45, all of that down in Anamosa, a good 45 minutes or so away from the murder scene. So that went right over the time frame of the homicide.
And you indicated that you were able to talk to Jerry's wife, Christy Frazier.
Yes, I spoke to Christy.
Was she ever a suspect?
No.
Why not?
Christy's whereabouts, again, were accounted for. She provided that she was working on with this charity event all day along with other members of the community. The son also understood. His mother had said that's where she was at. Jerry understood that as well. So there was no concern about that.
As part of your investigation, did you conduct an interview of the defendant, Todd Mullis?
Yes.
And was that on November 16th, 2018?
Yes, that was the first time that I spoke to the defendant.
And where did that interview take place?
I invited him to come to the Delaware County Sheriff's Office in Manchester to talk to me.
Was anybody else present for that conversation?
Initially, the sheriff, John LeClaire, made some introductions that would be pretty normal. He had some familiarity with the defendant. I did not. So the sheriff made some introduction and then politely stepped out of the room after several minutes, and then it was just the defendant and I for about the next 2.5 hours or so.
Approximately how long did that conversation last?
The two of us talked for about 2.5 hours before we moved on to some other things.
And was that interview both video and audio recorded?
Yes, the Delaware County Sheriff's Office has an interview room that video and audio records for us.
And Agent, can you just explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how did that interview start and what was the first portion of that video?
So as with every interview we conduct with victims, witnesses, and suspects, there's quite a bit of background conversation. So I asked Todd about his upbringing and where he's lived. We talk about his parents, his two brothers, talk about how he met and married Amy, go through some things, their children, and also his work and some of those things.
And did you then, after that portion, did you ask the defendant specifically about Saturday, November 10th, 2018?
Yes, I did. We actually talked about his marriage, and then we actually I asked him if we can talk specifically and in great detail about Saturday, November 10th.
And what does the defendant indicate to you at that time?
About Saturday?
Yes.
So he goes through his, I ask him to spare no detail. No detail's too small. I'd love to hear everything. And he walks me through his day Saturday.
And if you can give a summary of what the defendant indicated.
He said that morning that he had gotten up. He and his teenage son, Tristan, he has two other small children, Wyatt and Taylor. But he and Tristan actually go off the farm, I believe over to his brother's place. They're contemplating doing some field work that day, but it's too cold. And he tells his brother that they're not, in fact, going to do field work and that they've decided to go back to their home, their farm, and they're going to work in the hog building, and they're going to hang heaters that day since it's too cold to actually do field work. So they return to their home that morning. I believe he says that's about 8:30. They actually go in the house. They have a little bit of breakfast, a piece of toast and some water, and they're talking. Amy is up and working on a puzzle. And so he tells me about that, and then the plan is for all three of them to go out into the hog building and work together, which they then do through that morning. He says during the course of that time of work, he's quick to point out to me on two instances. He says in particular, he looks over, he's watching her, and she's kind of dizzy. And he says he's concerned, and she's really not doing any good, and he tells her, why don't you just go into the house? And so before he tells her to go in the house, he says, why don't you stop and pick up a pet carrier, which is over in this red shed. And so he said, just stop over there, grab that, set it down over here on the other side of the drive, the parking lot, and then go to the house. And so he says that's his understanding as to what she did. Sometime later, I believe he tells me about maybe 20, 30, 45 minutes later, I think he puts on the high side, he happens to look out and notice that the pet carrier he's asked her to go and get and set over by the other building is not there. So he sends Tristan over to the red building to see what's going on with his mother and why that didn't get accomplished. He says Tristan then sounds the alarm and says something's wrong. And Todd goes over and finds Amy face down in kind of a crouched position with a corn rake in her back. And he says that he tries to, pick her up and move her. He can't because the corn rake is hitting things. So he puts his hands on the corn rake, manipulates the corn rake, pulls it free, throws it to the side, and then is able to take her and put her into his vehicle with Tristan opening the door, and they begin to head towards the hospital and call 911.
And he actually demonstrates for you the way in which he found Amy when he was called over to the red shed.
That's correct.
Now, before you gave us that summary, you indicated that at some point you asked the defendant how his relationship was with Amy.
Yes.
And what did he initially indicate to you?
Told me his marriage was great. It was very good. They had good communication. He talks about it, them being very open. He uses the word open or openness very much. He describes himself as being very loving and kind and comforting with Amy. And he says, like any marriage, when something comes up, he's able to bring that to her, or she's able to bring things to him, but that they have a very healthy marriage.
Did you then ask him if there's ever been any problems or any affairs in their marriage?
Yes.
And what did the defendant indicate to you?
So the defendant does tell me that about 5 years prior, Amy had been involved in an affair. And we talk about that, and then he tells me that he has to confront Amy about that affair, and we go through the details of that. And then I said, "Did you have to confront her about any other such things?" And he says, "No."
After you ask the defendant that, what did you say?
So, knowing at this point in the investigation already, I've already talked to Amy's friends that are aware of the now current affair with Jerry Frazier. I've actually met with Jerry Frazier at length, and he's provided all of the detail and has told me that Todd had confronted he and Amy and Jerry's wife. Todd is not providing that to me, so I try to prompt that again. I try and take a different angle. So my next immediate topic is, "Hey, do you know Jerry Frazier? Tell me about your relationship with Jerry." And then,
At that point, does the defendant tell you anything about suspecting a relationship between Amy and Jerry Frazier?
no. At this point, he tells me that the relationship he has with Jerry is business, that Jerry works for JBS and is subcontracted basically to come in and provide these hogs and take care of them. And so I do ask him, "Well, can you describe Amy's relationship with Jerry?" Again, trying to provide another opportunity for him to disclose this current affair. And again, he just tells me that, well, Amy also has some business interaction with him because she works on the farm with me.
What did you do then in the interview?
So at that point, with him still not having disclosed the second affair, despite my best efforts to give him opportunity to do so, I actually take a break and offer to go get him a glass of water. So I step out of the room for about 3 minutes and get myself a glass of water, and I bring the defendant a glass of water and set that down for him.
And when you come back in, is that when the defendant then, what does he say then to you?
So at this point, apparently having thought about this for 3 minutes or so in silence, he decides at that point, he said, "Actually, there is something I need to tell you. I did have concerns about Amy and Jerry."
And Agent, you've recently watched your 2.5-hour video of the interaction or the interview that you had with the defendant on that date.
Yes, I have.
And were you able to make a clip that indicates the part that you just summarized for us?
Yes.
Your Honor, Your Honor, I'll mark this as State's Exhibit number 113. Agent, prior to testifying, did you provide me with a clip of what you just summarized?
Yes, there were 2 clips provided on a thumb drive to you.
And the first clip on that thumb drive, is that a true and accurate copy of the actual recording or the interview that you conducted with Todd Mullis on November 16th, 2018?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that State's Exhibit number 113 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection?
Your Honor, the state may be aware of this morning. I don't have any objection, but I guess since it's going to be a snippet or a clip from sections, it may lead to playing the whole thing, but this will be our first opportunity to see it, but at this point I don't object.
Okay. We'll keep the door open to the defense playing other portions of that recording if necessary, but 113 is admitted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I publish it to the jury?
Yes.
Afterwards, when we actually bonded really, we were bonded actually better because we kind of healed together.
Just a moment, Judge. I just want to make sure.
mean, there was always, she was very open, and she knew that, I always told her that, I gotta be able to, trust her, you gotta rebuild that. But it was good, She was like, hey, I'm just running with, she was open, she was real open with me. Yeah. Which you have to be in a marriage, so, and I felt good about that. Yeah. Right. Were you, okay. Were you, suspicious of her after this first deal, or were you willing to let it go? I mean, it was so open, it was like, it was an open, I guess it was if I had a question or I didn't feel right, I would just say, and then she'd play it. And it was no big deal. It meant to say I was uncomfortable with something. Or she was uncomfortable with me. It was just, just talking up. Yeah. We'd sit across from each other and try and, hash it out. Did you ever have to confront her again? Was there ever any other situations? Okay. Well, no. Okay. So come Saturday, other than she was just working through some issues with her bleeding and some of the... She did say, she goes, I think I'm bleeding again, and that was... she said, I think I'm bleeding a little bit. Was that on Saturday? No, not Saturday, but I don't know, I mean, she just... I had asked her every day, bleeding well a little bit, and then, I think I'm bleeding a little bit. Yeah. Whatever, So you said things were good, marriage was good leading up to this, other than she's just working through some issues and you're being sensitive as a husband to help her. Well, yeah, you're kind of watching out for her, Yeah. Okay. You have a guy who helps coordinate the hogs out there, is my understanding. Jerry. Okay, tell me about Jerry and the relationship there that you have with him. Okay. Tell me about that. He's our field manager. Okay. And, it was just, he comes around, he's got questions, whatever, How long have you known Jerry? Since I started with the hogs. Yeah, how long's that been? 2012. Okay. So when you built that first one, that's when that relationship with Jerry started? I think it was the right way. Okay. And how does that work? So he's not employed by you? Or is he? Yes. Okay. And so how does Cargill Cargill out of Cigarette? No, it was Cargill at first and they switched it to CBS. Okay. And how's that working? Because you're not paying him directly, do you pay JBS for a service or how? No, as far as how JBS, how's it work? So you own the hog. Yep. Now tell me, how's JBS get involved? How's this happen? Just explain it to me. They rent spaces. JBS rent spaces from you? Okay. And what's Jerry's role in this? He's an employee of JBS. We call him a field manager. Yep. And what's he do? He basically comes out if we need him, checks on pigs, says he should run meds, this and that. Okay. And he's been doing that for you since 2012? Yes. Okay. And your relationship with him, how often do you see him? Is that a weekly thing? Monthly thing? It could be a weekly thing. It could be... I mean, it just depends what time of year it is, or what stage of the pigs. Right. So pigs are newer, he's maybe being more attentive, or he's out there more when you get... Well, when you get pigs in, he might be there more often. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. You should run more meds, or less, or... Yeah. This and that and the other thing. Yeah. Okay. And your relationship with Jerry, was that strictly a business relationship? Did you guys become friends or anything like that? I mean, it was good. We had, one time he gave us tickets to, Monticello Fair. Oh, yeah. 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 To the, is it the Jones County Fair. They put on that's a big county fair. Mm-hmm. Okay. What about Evie? Did she have a relationship with Jerry, or how did that go with them? Yeah. Tell me about that. I relied on her to do a lot of the interactions. Mm-hmm. And just, I mean, it's just like the normal guy coming around, you know, they call Jerry and get some more meds ordered. Okay. You know, I didn't know she did. Okay. And that was her, so she had some of the business interchange with Jerry. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay. 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 All right. Anything else that we didn't talk about that you think would be important for me to know? You mentioned your relationship with your boy at the start. I thought it was pretty cool. You said, you know, he's 13 now. Does he get to spend a lot of time with you, with Dad? With me? Yeah. He's no. Yeah. He's in school, obviously. Yeah, he's in school, and then after school, is he working with you after school? Once in a while. Yeah. I mean, if I'm close. Yeah. Before school, or different? No, he gets up and just goes to school. Yeah, but after school, sometimes when you're close by or when you're around, yeah, weekends, you get to hang out with you? Okay. He's kind of, we're close. Yeah, you're close. He look up to you? I think so. Yeah, I think he's my buddy. Yeah, no, yeah, you bet. For real. Good deal. Okay. Tell you what, are you good? Can I grab you a drink of water real quick? I just want to check on one thing. Are you good? Hanging tight for a second? Sure. Yep. Can I get you a drink of water? Let me see if I can grab one for you. Are you good? Go on. Okay. I'll be right back. much to it. Okay, so you said you had a conversation with Jerry, or was it with Amy? I was confused. Actually, both of them. With both. I just said, hey, if you need something, the thing I had with Jerry is, I said, if you could just ask me, instead of always texting me. Okay. So were you worried about, because Amy was... Well, I mean, you know, it was, I guess, it was just making me feel uncomfortable. Kind of like I said, we were open. Yeah. And I just said, Amy, I said, just, if it's okay, I just said, don't. If you need something, just have him text me, because I just, if you don't want to laugh, and it's like, well, maybe I had a little suspicion, but it was just, whatever, you know, I just wanted to feel comfortable. Yeah. And then, well, it was simple, it was a real simple deal. With me, you know, Jerry was real comfortable with it. Yeah, when was that? Probably June. June of this year? I'm guessing. Was that face-to-face, or? No. It was just a phone call, and I'd say, you don't mind, it's just... Did something cause you to have that conversation with him? What made you... I just had a bad... No. I don't remember what it was. I think I seen her phone, and there was a lot of text there. Okay. And I just said, well, I go, don't be... I said, it does not make me feel comfortable. Yeah. You know. And when you say that, well, when you're not comfortable, are you thinking back to 5 years prior? Yeah, you're... It just says, I'm not accusing nobody of nothing. Just, you know, just... Inside where you... Yeah, I just kind of had a bad feeling, and then I just said, hey... And then I just called him and said, hey, just, if you could just come to me... Oh, that's a problem, no problem. And then you had a conversation with Amy? Same time frame? And how'd that go? Tell me about that. What was that conversation? It was kind of awkward at first, and then it was just... That was face-to-face? It was face-to-face. I don't remember. The house, probably. But it was a tough conversation, though, right? Like you said, it was awkward. Actually, well, yeah. And you're having flashbacks to... Yeah. So, tell me about that conversation. What did she say about it? She just said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I said, come on here, you know, it's just this uncomfortable feeling, you know? Yeah. And she goes, oh, okay. Well, what do you think I'm doing something? And I go, I'm not accusing you of nothing. I said, just want to be fine, you know? Or I did. I just told her that. She was, okay, well, if that makes me feel more comfortable, then I think she kind of didn't understand at first. She goes, well, I got to talk to him. I said, well, yeah, that's fine. I don't care if you overfeed, but just don't make it about pigs or something like that, because he should show pigs and all that. Just kind of keep it professional, you know? Yeah. Yeah. So you didn't want her to talk about the pigs with him, or? Well, no, the pigs, but he had show pigs and whatever, you know. And were they talking about show pigs? Well, it was that time of year they were showing pigs. Yeah, who showed, did he show pigs? Or did he show pigs? And then they were talking about Taylor showing the pigs and all that, like. So he and Amy were starting to have conversations about showing pigs, so things other than the hog barns, yeah, and I said it was not here, just said I wasn't comfortable with it. It was getting friendlier than you wanted. Yeah. Not business at that point? Well, I thought. Yeah. Did Jerry deny having an affair with Amy? He said he denied it. Yeah, he denied it. He just said, hey, dude, there's nothing going on. No relationship, no sex? No. What about Amy? Did she deny it? She denied it. Well, she just said, it's just, you know, no, there's no sex. Just... Did you believe her? Yeah, I did. Yeah. I did. Being they were both open about it. I mean, yeah. And that was it. After he said no and she said no. And I said, I don't care if you need to contact her. Just keep it with the Barnes. Mm-hmm. Just keep it with the Barnes. And I said, and then I don't care. I said, just don't do it so often, you know. If it's a, you know, whatever. And these two conversations, one with Jerry, one with Amy, they happened in about June of this year? I think it was, yeah. Pretty close to that. And after the two conversations, do you put this to rest then? Have you had any follow-up conversations? I've never had any, no. And I just talked to him the other day. And no further conversation with Amy? Not at all. Okay. And in your mind, was it put to rest? Actually, it was. I felt you were done. There's no... Yeah, I let it go. I mean, we both... It was kind of a... You know, as long as we're straight with each other and honest, and then... And, he calls me, whatever, it was just no comment. It was nothing... That was it. That was it. It was just that one... After June, that was it. Okay, tell me...
Agent, a minute ago I asked you, before we looked at that clip, I asked you about whether or not you asked Todd to summarize what happened on Saturday, November 10th, 2018. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And at any point during that summary, did you ask Todd if anyone else was on the farm that day?
Yes, I did.
And what was Todd's response?
He told me no one was on the farm that day except him, Tristan, Amy, and the two smaller children in the house.
And did you go further and ask Todd if he has any workers or anybody else that generally works at their farm?
Yes, I tried to clarify if there was the possibility of any working men or hired hands or anyone that would also be on the property for some reason.
And what was Todd's response to that?
He said there was no one else on the property that day.
Now, Agent, as part of your involvement in this case, did you learn about the results of the medical examiner's report
Yes.
or conclusions?
Yes.
And how did you learn about that?
I'm provided a copy of the autopsy report when it's finalized. As part of the investigative team, I also had the opportunity to have some conversation with the state medical examiner that conducted the autopsy, Dr. Cruz.
And when you spoke to Todd on November 16th, 2018, were you aware of the fact that this was considered a homicide?
Yes, I had been told at that point that the medical examiner believed this was now a homicide.
And at that point, was the medical examiner's report released yet?
No, that was completely inside of the closed circles of the investigative and prosecutive team.
So the public had not heard yet that this was deemed a homicide?
No, it was still being considered an accidental fall to the public.
During your conversation with Todd on November 16th, 2018, did you tell the defendant that Amy's death was a homicide?
Yes, I did.
And what was the defendant's reaction when you told him that?
No time after I tell him that does he deny and say, no, I did not kill my wife. In fact, as I proceed for the next 35 plus minutes to tell him the evidence is very clear, in fact, it is a homicide and you killed Amy, the most I get from him, it's a very flat emotional affect. He says, how? And he says, what evidence do you have? And you tell me what the police know, but never, no, I didn't kill my wife.
Did Todd ever react to the fact that you just told him his wife was killed on his property by somebody?
No.
And did he ever, in that 35 minutes, deny killing Amy?
No. And at no other time did he.
Did he ever, at that point, tell you that there was somebody else on the farm?
No, he did not tell me to look for anyone else that killed her.
Did he give you any ideas of any suspects or anybody with any motive to kill Amy?
No.
And did he tell you at any point that he heard anybody else come onto his farm that day?
No, he did not.
And how would you describe Todd's reaction when you, for 35 minutes, confronted him with the fact that his wife was killed?
Well, I've done this dozens and dozens of times over the course of my career, and this is a very unemotional, very flat. He just sits there. Like I said, a few statements about what evidence I actually have, but no denial. And then he just sits and listens, very contemplatively. He looks at me, looks off in the distance. Sometimes he looks down as he's considering everything that I say. As I continue to tell him, the evidence at this point is overwhelming. This is, in fact, a homicide. You did kill Amy. He just sits there.
Judge, can we approach?
Yes. Okay, folks, it's just about noon. The prosecution intends to show another clip from that video, and that clip's going to be a little bit longer than the first one, and over the lunch hour, we're going to work on getting better audio so that you can hear it better. So we're going to take our lunch break at this time. Remember the admonition I gave you before. We will start back up again at 1:15, report back to the jury room.